Oil in your diet, is it killing you? Is it healthy for you? Let's figure it out right now. Hey everyone, this is Stephen Loam, lifestyle medicine cardiologist, and if it's your first time on this channel and you want to learn more about evidence-based nutrition, all things around lifestyle medicine, then make sure you click that subscribe button, turn the notifications on so you don't miss anything. So in this video, we're going to talk about oil. Now, I'm not talking about motor oil or essential oils. I'm talking about oils in your diet. Olive oil, palm oil, canola oil, all these different vegetable oils and coconut oil that you see added to so many different foods. Should you be having them in your diet? Are they good for you? Are they bad for you? Are there certain people that should avoid it? Let's get into it right now. We know that lifestyle medicine physicians actually say that we want to focus on eating only whole foods. Is oil really a whole food? We say we don't want processed foods, which is potato chips, cookies, crackers, cakes, donuts. We don't want refined grains, and oils are highly processed, right? Second category foods, animal foods. Third is whole plant foods. We don't want the processed foods. We don't want the animal-based foods. We want to focus mostly on whole plant foods. Make sure you stick around all the way to the end of the video where I'll tell you straight out who it is that can tolerate oil in the diet and which type is better than others. And we certainly know that fried foods aren't good for you, right? But what about when you intentionally put oil on foods like on a salad, or you're cooking some vegetable stir fry with pouring some oil on it? Is that good for you? And oil sneaks in so many different places in the different foods that you see. If you look at labels, you'll see even raisins will have oils. You'll see peanut butter has added oils. Most breads have added oils to them. Spaghetti sauces will have tons of different oils. You'll find it in chocolate. You'll find it in so many different products you wouldn't believe. Even this healthy minestrone soup, multiple types of oil. We're even giving it to the babies. Look at baby formula. The main ingredients, oil. So here's the approach we're going to take about talking about oil. First, we're going to take a little bit of a common sense approach, and then we're going to look more into the science about whether or not we should be having oil in our diet. Now, first things first, I want to say a lot of people say straight out, Doc, I know we need oils in our diet. The human body needs oils. And no, that's not true. We need fat in our diet. We don't necessarily need to get that fat from oils. And it'll blow people's mind away sometimes when you actually look that plant foods all have some percentage of fat in them. And even higher fat plant foods like nut seeds, avocado, coconut, soy, those types of foods will have even more fat in them. And from a common sense perspective, oil is highly processed. You squeeze 43 olives and you'll get 1 tablespoon of olive oil. That's really no different than squeezing a bunch of oranges and getting the orange juice out of it. You're leaving all the fiber behind, and you really want that fiber. You want to eat the food in the intact state the way nature intended you to, not in a processed pure fat state like olive oil and other types of oils really are. And if you've ever seen the way the oils are processed, it's kind of mind-blowing. Check this out. So if you take a sunflower seed, first you have to clean it, grind it, press it, then extract the oil right out of it. Then the oil goes to centrifuge, added water, and then it gets bleached and deodorized because I guess it must smell bad. And that's a whole huge process of making oil. And if you look at evolution, we evolved over millions of years. Oil was only introduced about 5,000 to 6,000 years ago, right about here, just recently. We haven't had time to evolve and adapt to concentrated, highly processed fats from oils. And we know that protein and carbohydrates are only 4 calories per gram, whereas fat is 9 calories per gram. Oil is pure fat. If you want to know how that affects weight loss, check out my weight loss video. We talk all about what's called calorie density. But really briefly, just look at this chart. When you look at all foods in the human diet, oil is the most calorie dense, coming in at about 4,000 calories per pound. And when you look at the average of whole plant foods in their intact state, they average about 500 calories per pound, which is perfect because the average human eats about 3 to 4 pounds of food per day. And when you look at different types of oil, it doesn't matter which type of oil you're consuming. All of them are extraordinarily calorie dense, around 4,000 calories per pound. Come on, Dr. Loam, there's no way that somebody's going to eat a pound of oil. You're just kind of exaggerating things, right? Well, according to the USDA, the average American eats about 1 pound of oil per week. So no, I'm not exaggerating anything. People actually do eat about a pound of oil per week. And yes, if you eat fat, you could just, boom, store it as fat. It's that easy. There's no chemical process you need to do to change fat into something else to store it. Like if you eat carbohydrates or protein, to make it into fat is a big process. But if you eat fat, you could just store it. Check out this study right here. They actually took people and just said, hey, what did you eat in the last 24 hours? And boom, they stuck a needle in their fat and they did a biopsy, looked under the microscope to see what kind of fat were they eating. And they saw that if you ate fish, you would have omega-3 stored. If you ate steak, you would actually have those types of fats stored. If you ate cheese or dairy, you'd have dairy fat stored in your fat biopsy. And if you actually had oils, you would have those types of polyunsaturated or monounsaturated fats in the fat biopsy. And that led to the quote, "The fat you eat is the fat you wear from your lips to your hips." But come on, doc, when you eat those carbohydrate-filled donuts, you're going to gain a bunch of weight. Well, yeah, you do gain weight from donuts because when you look at donuts, they're nearly half of calories from the oil and the fat that's added to them. The fat's what makes you gain weight, not the carbohydrates. Even though the white refined carbohydrates in those donuts, yeah, they're not good for you. They're not a health food. That's not what makes you actually gain weight. There's something called de novo lipogenesis. The body doesn't want to take a carbohydrate and turn it into fat. That's a very energy inefficient process, using about 33% of the energy of the food in order to actually convert it into fat. And yeah, this weight gain thing from eating too much fats, it's a very important thing because people want to be as thin as possible for cancer and heart disease risk. According to the American Cancer Research Institute, individuals should be as lean as possible without becoming underweight in order to prevent cancers. And they do recommend a plant-based diet. So certainly for cancer risk, we want to be as lean as possible, and fats and oils are going to lead to weight gain, so we really should eliminate them, right? How about heart disease? Well, saturated fat. Look at this chart. Every single oil has some degree of saturated fat, even olive oil. And look at coconut oil, a ton of saturated fat. And remember, the Institute of Medicine did not set an upper limit of normal for how much saturated fat is safe for you to eat, because any saturated fat intake above 0 is going to increase the LDL cholesterol levels. And it's so important to keep your LDL crazy low. We know the average American's at about 125 for their LDL, and that puts them at significant risk for heart disease. But if you can keep your LDL crazy low, like under 70, maybe around the 60 range from early in childhood, you're nearly guaranteed to never develop cardiovascular disease just based on that. If you want to learn more about that, check out my heart disease prevention and reversal video, and it'll go into detail. Now let's talk about omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. We evolved with about a 2-to-1 ratio of omega-6 to omega-3. We'd like to keep it there. And if you want to know a lot more details about this, check out my macronutrient video, which we go into a lot of details. But briefly, if you look at all these different processed oils, they're very, very high in general in omega-6s and very, very low in omega-3. So it is extremely hard to keep your omega-6 to omega-3 ratio around a 2-to-1 or even 4-to-1 if you're consuming significant amounts of oils. And again, to point out the olive oil, which everybody thinks is healthy for them, it has a 10-to-1 ratio of omega-6 to omega-3. And this table here summarizes very well a bunch of the negative research on oils and the negative effects that they could have on your health, increasing the risk of obesity and diabetes, causing atherosclerosis with different types of fats that are found in oils. Similarly, another study in monkeys, of course, I don't advocate animal experimentation, but it did show that it can increase the risk of atherosclerosis. Other studies have shown progression of heart disease, even in humans, which we're going to go over. Decreased flow-mediated dilation, meaning the arteries don't work as well and they can't deliver as much flow in more than one study, including with olive oil. And olive, soybean, and palm oil showed a 31% increase in endothelial impairment of the lining of your arteries, as well as 25% of people still had heart attacks and cardiovascular events at 4 years while on a Mediterranean diet, highly supplemented with oil. Tons of research showing oil is not necessarily good for you. So just to be sure that you're clear on the naming of these different fats, we have monounsaturated fats like oleic acid and polyunsaturated fats like linoleic acid. A monounsaturated fat, mono means one, has one double bond, which actually leaves a vacancy of 2 different hydrogens within its structure. A polyunsaturated fat, poly means many, has 2 double bonds, which actually leaves a vacancy of 4 hydrogens within its structure. And to make it simple, we actually call these MUFAs and PUFAs. And monounsaturated fats come in much higher concentrations in many different types of processed oils. Now, poor monkeys, but in this study here, they actually gave monkeys different types of fats and followed them for 5 years to see if they're going to develop heart disease. And coronary artery atherosclerosis, as measured by the intimal area, was less if you had polyunsaturated fat compared to saturated fat. However, when they actually looked at it, what they found was having monounsaturated fat was just as bad as saturated fat within your diet for developing atherosclerosis or heart disease. And this is a very powerful study. But it's an animal study. So does that correlate to human disease as well? Well, this study by Blankenhorn actually did just that. They did real angiograms before and after giving different types of fats over many, many years to see. And they looked at angiograms to see, did an artery start normal and become blocked like this picture here shows? And they found that if you ate lauric acid, oleic acid, or linoleic acid, you had a significant increased risk of clogging your arteries. They said that protein and carbohydrates are preferred substitutes for fat calories to prevent heart disease. When you look at the table again of oils, you're going to find olive oil is actually 71% oleic acid, which was correlated with developing new artery clogging. 10% of it is the polyunsaturated fats, which also were not that great for you either. And 14% were saturated fats, which we know are very bad and raise your LDL cholesterol level. So why is it that people think olive oil is so good for them? Well, it's because of studies like this. The Lionheart study with the Mediterranean diet did show that compared to a control diet, which is horrible, close to standard American diet, people actually had a lower rate of having heart attacks and cardiovascular events. But there were still a significant rate of cardiovascular disease. It didn't go down to zero, right? And then when you looked at what's called the PREDIMED study, which was published in the New England Journal of Medicine in 2013, very similarly, compared to a control diet, people on the Mediterranean diet supplemented with oil or nuts had a lower risk of major adverse cardiovascular events. So of course, what happened after the PREDIMED study? People just start pouring oil like crazy all over everything. Is that really what we should be doing? This is something that we call a substitutionary benefit. When you take something that's harmful and you replace it with something that's less harmful for you, you're going to see a benefit. But does that mean that that less harmful thing is good for you? Or is it simply just less harmful for you? So for example, when you take saturated fat out of your diet, like they did in these studies in the PREDIMED and in the Lionheart study, they actually removed those saturated fats and replaced them with unsaturated fats, like polyunsaturated, monounsaturated fats, the olive oils, right? And they said, hey, look, there's a decrease in heart disease risk. Yay, let's throw a party. It must mean that these unsaturated fats are good for you. Olive oil is good for you, right? Well, actually, no, not at all. Think about this. If you had somebody's diet that was really high in cyanide, and you said, let's replace the cyanide with arsenic. And then you said, hey, look, not as many people died when they had arsenic in their diet. That must mean arsenic is good for you. Yay, let's throw a party and feed everybody arsenic. Well, no, maybe arsenic is less harmful for you than cyanide. That doesn't mean arsenic is good for you. That's the exact same thing that happens when they take saturated fat out and they replace it with unsaturated fats like olive oils and such. The olive oil is better for your health than fat from animals and fat that's saturated, but it is still harmful to you, as we've clearly shown. Now let's go back to the PREDIMED study and look at this graph that shows a combination of heart attack, stroke, and overall cardiovascular death. Compared to the control diet, the Mediterranean-style diet was better, as indicated by this area here. But how about this area? People on the diet still had events. They still had heart attack, strokes, and cardiovascular deaths. This is what's called the residual risk. When you look at overall mortality, you see the exact same thing. There was still a significant overall residual risk. But when you look at studies by Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn and others that are reversing heart disease, they took a lot of patients and they actually put them on a whole food plant-based, no oil diet. So 0 animal products, 0 oil, and they had a rate of 0.6% events compared to 62%. Now granted, this study wasn't as big as PREDIMED, it didn't have the greatest control group, but you had things like this, reversal of heart disease on both nuclear stress test pictures and on angiograms. We've seen this quite a bit, reproduced over and over again on whole food plant-based, no oil diet. So now if you were to take Dr. Esselstyn's data and throw it in the same graph as PREDIMED, you're going to see the line go like this. And look at the dinky little residual risk that happens. So therefore, cutting the oils out of your diet and all the animal products out of your diet, which a Mediterranean diet didn't do, is going to give you even more benefit to reducing overall cardiovascular risk. Dean Orner said straight out in an editorial that a Mediterranean diet might be better than what most people are consuming, but even better is a diet based on whole foods and plants, which of course would exclude oil. And just for some added benefit to show more reasons to get rid of oil, we know that high-fat diets can increase the risk of diabetes by the accumulation of intramyocellular lipids, causing insulin resistance. We also know that oil in your diet and high-fat meals increase clotting factor 7 activation, which could actually cause blood clots, which we don't want. And we've seen again and again and again that fish oil does not reduce your overall cardiovascular risk. The only time it's ever indicated to give fish oil, according to the guidelines from the American Heart Association and the American College of Cardiology, is if somebody's triglycerides are over 500 despite diet and lifestyle and despite using statin therapy, then maybe fish oil could be used to reduce triglycerides. So again, we don't need to use the fish oil either. So I need to say one more thing about coconut oil, because there's a big myth out there that coconut oil is actually good for you, and it is not. It is 82% saturated fat. It raises LDL levels, and because of the saturated fat content, it's actually solid at room temperature, right? We know very clearly that it does not promote overall cardiovascular health. The American Heart Association put out a big presidential advisory and stated that straight out, that coconut oil is not good for you. And while there may be many different magnificent ways you could use coconut oil, I would not recommend putting on your bread. Sure, use it to get rid of a lice infestation or use it for your hair. That sounds good. I know that out in nature, they certainly use it for their hair, right? So who is it that can tolerate some oil in their diet? Well, if you meet these 6 criteria, then I think you're going to be okay with little bits of oil in your diet. And you want to choose things such as the canola oils or maybe the flax oils that are lower in saturated fat, higher in the omega-3s. They're all very calorie dense. And that's why the first thing out of 6 that you need to be is at your ideal body weight. So being real thin is super important for your cancer risk and overall health. So be thin, and oil and fats will make you gain weight. So ideal body weight. I'll put a calculator in the description below for you to calculate your own ideal body weight. 2, you need to be free of cardiovascular disease. You could never have had a heart attack, stroke, an aneurysm, a clog anywhere. If you've been told that you have cholesterol buildup, atherosclerosis, oil's not right for you. It causes endothelial dysfunction, right? Your LDL cholesterol needs to be under 70. We want it as crazy low as we can. And remember, the saturated fat within any type of oil will raise your LDL level. So if your LDL cholesterol is above 70, you really shouldn't be having any oil in your diet. You want to be free of insulin resistance. You don't want the lipids to accumulate inside your cells. You don't want the intramyocellular or intrahepatic cellular lipids to build up, causing insulin resistance. You should not have any inflammatory conditions like a lupus or rheumatoid arthritis, because again, the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio is so important. And then lastly, if you have a very, very strong history of cardiovascular disease in your family, like your mom and dad in their 40s, 50s, or 60s developed cardiovascular disease, even if you don't have any of the other criteria, I would still advise staying away from the oils as much as you can. Now I get it to the vegans that ditch animal products for the environment or for ethical reasons. I'm all for that. Those are major motivations as to why it is that I ditched all the animal products as well. But what I want you to realize is that oils just aren't good for you. Even if you're eating a vegan diet, which is generally going to be healthier than most diets for sure, and if you keep it whole food plant-based with no oil, it is the absolute healthiest way to possibly eat. A vegan diet with significant oil in it still is not healthy for you. You can still become overweight or obese, develop diabetes or heart disease if you eat a vegan diet that's full of more processed foods. So great, ditch the animal products for the environment, for the animals, but please vegans, don't think that oil is good for you, and please also focus on your health, because you could advocate better for the animals and better for the environment if you yourself stay healthy, if you yourself stay thin and strong, and make sure you don't develop any cardiovascular disease, diabetes, or hypertension. People are going to look at you and say, why would I want to eat a vegan diet if this person in front of me eating a vegan diet is overweight, obese, has diabetes, or just had a stroke? That's not a healthy diet for me. So be a good example and eat a good, clean, healthy, whole food, plant-based vegan diet that is low in oils or is as oil-free as you could possibly get it. So I hope you liked this video. Please give me a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe to the channel and turn those notifications on so you don't miss future videos. And give me a comment in the section below. Do you include oils in your diet? Are you having a hard time getting oils out of your diet? Any tips or tricks that you have, or any other thoughts on anything else that we discussed here? See you next time.